So over the last few weeks, I've been playing Fire Emblem Three Houses pretty much nonstop. I've now played through three of the four routes. I hope four routes is not still spoiler territory anymore. It's been nearly a month since the game came out, so I think I'll get a pass on this. Um, so I've played through all of the routes except for the church route at this point. So I can't really comment on that route, but so far I've had a lot of fun with the game. And recently I decided to go look on a lot of forums about what people were thinking about the game, and it sounds like, for whatever reason, people are really divided on Cyril as a character, not as a character per se, but as a unit, which I just find really interesting. And I thought I might go over some of why I think that might be the case, and why I think it's dumb, and pretty much everybody is misanalyzing the situation. I mean, the hilarious thing is that I think half the people haven't even used the character. And full disclaimer, there are a few characters that I haven't used because I thought they were going to be bad, or I thought some of the teachers would be too broken. I haven't used Shamir or Catherine, so I can't comment on if they're really good units or not. But those have potential. Anyways, the point is that the game has hardly been out, and people are already analyzing the meta and pretending they know exactly what's going on. And I thought I would pitch in a little bit, not to basically point out that I totally know exactly what's going on with the meta of this game, or exactly how the gameplay is going to develop as the new difficulty comes out or whatever. But just to try to analyze this thing that's going on with Cyril. And okay, so I guess I'll just get into it. Basically, Cyril, so he has this personal skill, Aptitude, which people who have played the previous games will recognize. It basically boosts every stat, every growth by 20% or something. I think that's what it is, at least in this game. Anyways, it's really amusing because it's been on characters like Donald, which have been divisive because there are a lot of people that basically est characters, essentially, where you have this character that's really bad to begin with and have high growth rates. Let me silence my phone real quick. But basically, the funny thing about this is that people automatically assume that Cyril is an est because he has the aptitude thing, which is really weird to me. Because here I'll show you. Basically, so these are Cyril's growths with aptitude. So actually, the hilarious thing about all of this is that he has not actually terrible bases, and by the time you can recruit him, he's perfectly fine. And these are actually just fairly normal growth rates. There's nothing special about this. So it's not he's obviously a growth unit, but everybody sees Aptitude and they're well, he must be a growth unit. So there's so many people with fond memories of Donald that want him to be really amazing, and they're he's totally god tier because he has Aptitude, right? And then there's all these people that are basically saying, well, his growths aren't even that good, and it's which is true. I mean, they're nothing special, but basically, a ton of people just immediately bench the guy as soon as they recruit him, just because it's oh, they think because he has Aptitude, he must be an est, and ests are pitfalls, they must be bad, whatever. I just think it's really amusing, but it's terribly mislabeling too. So I'll try to go through. I'm gonna compare him to Hilda and Petra, which are considered two of the better units in the game right now, from what I can tell. They're two of the most natural flyers. The female flyers tend to do better because they translate faster, and they have Pegasus Knight that they can go through, which male flyers don't. Male flyers tend to be footlocked until they can get to Wyvern Rider. I mean, pretty much nobody goes from Cav to Flyer that I can think of, so basically, if you want a male flyer, they're a bit disadvantaged. But I'm gonna basically go through why I think that he's actually he's worse, okay, than Hilda and Petra, but he's not terrible. And frankly, I think he's worth a slot on Blue Lions and Golden Deer routes. I know on any of the Black Eagles routes, you can't actually recruit him early, so all of the calculus on all of this is like a little different with that. But basically, here I'll just go through this. So basically, I think the optimal path for Cyril is you can recruit him as early as chapter 5. You can also recruit him in chapter 6. Basically, how the recruits work is they take the average growths of the character, and they apply them and just round them to the nearest whole number. And so, like, for chapter 1, all of the recruits, if you could recruit, would be at level 1, right? And then every chapter after that, they level up 2 levels, right? Which, in the early game, because you're not doing as many battles, if you're playing, like, super optimally, and you're basically just leveling up professor level, that means that the recruits will keep up until about chapter 5 or 6 when they start falling behind. And also, the AI, basically, I think what it does is it takes the first 2 stats that a unit excels in, and it invests in those, and, like, nothing else until you recruit them, and it's, like, not as efficient as you could be if you were, like, actually manually investing in them. Anyways, so I think, generally speaking, you should recruit characters as early as you can, so long as you're not just benching them immediately, right? And for Cyril, he doesn't actually have a whole lot of competition because he's one of the earliest characters you can recruit. I believe his requirement is like a level 10 Byleth or something. And in chapter 5, I believe is the earliest you can recruit him. And generally, I can just always recruit him there. My first playthrough, I recruited him in chapter 6 because I didn't actually know that there was the dormitory upstairs area where he is in chapter 5. But anyways, I in my Golden Deer playthrough, which I just did, I recruited him before chapter 5, and it worked out just fine. Basically, whenever he's in chapter 5, he joins with basically these stats that are here. The only difference here is I went ahead and basically gave him the fighter promotion, since he can automatically do that as soon as you get him, pretty much, and it just gives him 1 strength. It's nothing huge. But those are basically his bases, which are actually not even that bad. Like, that's pretty solid for this point in the game. Like, he's not that far behind a bunch of other characters that are all, like, around level 9 or 10 in chapter 5. Generally, I get to my level 10 promotions right after chapter 5. So he's, like, right in the ballpark here, and they're actually pretty solid. But yeah, so he'll join with that, and he has like C+, I think, in axes and mid C in bows. And if you basically just take a few weeks to go through his bow rank, you can get him C+, which is really important because he actually gets point blank volley, I believe is what it's called, which is basically a brave bow effect from really close up. So it like boosts damage and it's a brave bow effect. It's crazy. It's hilariously ridiculous. It actually makes him not struggle to get kills. The main thing that makes him struggle to get kills is the fact that he's a foot unit whenever you're starting to get paladins and flyers. But even then, like, your entire team is not comprised of those. So you're still, like, using slots up for units that are footlocked. But anyways, so if we go through his stats, I mean, you can see here basically that, well, we'll get points of comparison in a minute here, but basically, you take him from fighter to brigand because he can't be really mounted. He's good with cavalry, but I think it's a waste since he's like translates really nicely into flyers. So for anybody who doesn't know, he's good at axes, bows, lances, horses, and flying, I think. And I don't know. I think it would just be a waste to make him a bow knight, since like bow knights aren't as good as flyers in terms of mobility and general utility, and there are a lot fewer units that can really do well as a wyvern, that, as far as I know, from the units that I've tried to make wyverns. But anyways, so you take him from fighter to brigand to wyvern rider to wyvern lord, and basically, if you're just focusing on bows, axes, and flying, since you good at all those 3, you shouldn't have a problem. You have to dip a little bit into authority just to be able to get him a flying battalion by the time he's level 20 or so. That's the one problem with flying units, is that I think all the battalions for flyers are like D or higher or something like that. But anyways, yeah. So this is the path that I would take him through, and that I generally take him through. And so what you'll see me doing here is basically I take his recruitment stats, I promote him to fighter, and then I just do his averages, combining his growths with the class growths, and then I do like some little calculus in terms of like the class bonuses whenever you promote, and like the base stats of the class. So you'll notice some things like the res is like around at 8 and 12. Anyways, feel free to check my math on this. But basically, these are what his stats would be expected to be if you promoted at these very specific times, which are not always going to be perfect. And this is also without any, gardening stat boosting items. But yeah, so essentially, if you're looking at this, he actually looks pretty decent. In the end, he ends up being like, pretty solid flying unit with good enough speed, somewhat decent bulk. He's good enough dexterity where he won't miss with axes very often. He's got the speed to double and the strength to double with the axes and kill things, actually. Like, he doesn't have a ton of trouble killing things, especially with Silver Forges later in the game. So, he's like decent, and really he only struggles at all between when you recruit him at like level 9 and when you promote him at level 20. It's like, other than that, he's basically just kicking ass as a flyer, like all your flyers do. He's like a little bit worse. So we'll see here. We'll compare to Petra. So if you start with Petra in Black Eagles, this is like a completely viable path. This would be the optimal way to take her to do this similar sort of thing, where you just go through Peg Knight to get the early flying utility. You'll need lances for Wyvern Lord later anyways, so it's not a huge deal to go out of your way to get lances, and it helps a lot in early game by having like really early Canto on a flying unit. So for female Wyverns, this is actually like really good. But basically, she's just a really fast Wyvern Lord, and has like a little bit more strength and not quite as much dexterity. But she's actually ends up being somewhat comparable, just with a little more strength and speed. So basically, if you look at like the important stats, Cyril ends up being just a few behind in like strength or speed for both Petra and Hilda, who we're going to see in a second here. Hilda's basically in the same boat. A lot of people, if you're starting with Golden Deer, consider Hilda to be one of the better units in the game, because she translates so well into a Wyvern Rider, and Wyvern Riders are considered largely to be a lot of the meta right now. I don't know how well that's going to age, but right now that seems to be the case. And basically the deal with her is she's not quite as fast, although she's still pretty fast. She ends up being about as fast as Cyril, but she has more strength than Petra or Cyril. And yeah, she has like some dexterity problems, so she's like more likely to miss stuff. She also has a crest and like a bit more charm. I don't know. And HP. But she's like, again, here, we'll just go into the comparisons. So this is apples to oranges right here, so I'm not going to focus on this too long. But basically, Cyril is going to be a little behind because the Pegasus Knight promotion gives like a lot of extra speed. And so he starts several points of speed behind. But again, he has the Brave Bow skill that he gets like really easily. And he can level up pretty easily. Like I've had no problems in the past getting him to level 20 by about chapter 9, which is when I start promoting into the level 20 classes. And yeah, so you'll see here he's gonna basically stay around even in terms of strength with Petra, and around even in terms of speed. Well, he'll catch up with Hilda, but he'll stay around even from then on out after he gets a flying promotion. Again, it's hard to like really compare them here. It's just worth pointing out that his early game isn't quite as good because he doesn't have a mount yet. But again, you don't have like quite as many flying units early game, or like calves. Like maximum, you're gonna have like, I don't know, 4 between the two of those probably in a given playthrough. You're gonna have like 4 Pegasus Knights and calves at this point. So like half your team still is gonna be footlocked, including Byleth, and Byleth doesn't like have a ton of problems either. So, but here's level 20. So this is the first time that they're all 3 on mounts. So you can see here, Cyril seems to be basically caught up with Hilda, and it's gonna stay about the same distance apart on speed. So he has like relatively similar speed to Hilda, and he'll have relatively similar strength to Petra basically most of the way through. He ends up having a lot more dexterity, and a lot more luck and magic, but those don't matter quite as much. The dexterity one is nice because of the axes. But basically, by this point, he's very comparable to either of these units. Hilda doesn't really have trouble doubling things at this point, so I think it'd be a stretch to say that a level 20 Cyril, once you're getting to around chapter 9 or 10, is going to have like too many problems. Like the stat differences here are pretty negligible at this point, and then it just gets even more close from here, basically. So again, he stays relatively even with Hilda in speed. He stays a bit behind Petra in speed, but then he stays basically comparable with Petra in terms of strength. And you'll be behind Hilda in strength, essentially. And then that trend just continues once again through level 40, and presumably beyond into like level 50. I mean, I know that the Black Eagles Edelgard route, since it's shorter, you end up being around 40, and I don't think it's really worth bothering comparing level 50 stats, because like you're not going to be hitting anywhere near those levels until end game, and that's, even then, like my units weren't really hitting those stats. I think I hit like level 40-ish around chapter 18 or 19 in Golden Deer route this last time. But anyways, the point is basically that if you can get him to level 20, which really isn't that hard since most of your units are footlocked anyways still, you know, he actually ends up being a pretty good flyer, right? It's not like he catches up and overtakes either of these units. He's still clearly worse than either of these units, right? Aside from dexterity making him be able to hit, which is like the one thing he has going for him, and having point blank volley that can basically just delete certain really fast units, like assassins or something, or swordsmasters, and that's like a nice little niche for him. But generally speaking, he is worse than these units, but these are like 2 of the better units of the game, and he's like not that much worse. And so I just find it really interesting that basically all the people that are basically saying that he's an est and therefore good are ignoring the fact that he never catches up, right? And these 2 are like better in early game. Of course, he does end up having more utility than the calves, who fall off in late game, basically. We could talk about that a little later, I guess. But the other people are basically like, well, he has aptitude, therefore he must be a growth unit with bad bases, therefore he should just go straight to the bench. And so I just found it interesting if you like compare him against 2 of the better units in the game, he's actually still pretty good. And he has like a lot more long-term potential than the other units. And that's not even considering the fact that you don't even have to practically do anything to recruit him really early. You basically just need like a level 10 Byleth or something. I don't even know if the level 10 part is even required. I haven't tested that. But I know if you have a level 10 Byleth by chapter 5, you can recruit him. And again, well, anyways, frankly, you should be comparing him against the other units that are available around the same time in terms of their short and long-term potential. So basically what I'm going to show here is some units that I think that he should probably be considered better than, because he'll be comparable in terms of like short-term and better long-term than these units. So essentially, we'll go ahead and with Blue Lions. So basically, okay, so here's how this works. For pretty much all the maps, the minimum that you're gonna get for deployment slots is gonna be like 10 towards the end of the game, right? And basically, so pretty much throughout the game, you're gonna have like 10 deployment slots, more or less. And so basically, what that means is you have Byleth, and then the 8 students, right? And then you get Flane, and it's supposed to make room for all of those. But obviously, you can recruit students from other houses. You can recruit Cyril. You can recruit some of the teachers. So essentially, if you want to make room for Cyril, you got to prove that he's better than one of those, or several of those in this case, because there are some other really good replacement units as well. So generally, what I would say is Flane is just, she's not good. Okay, as soon as you get Flane, it's like, okay, so she gets rescue after about a month of grinding up her faith rank, right? Which is cool and all, but she has like 4 range on it. It's not like all that useful. And if you want to actually get range on it to be, for her to be like a really good utility unit, you have to actually feed her tons and tons of kills, and she's really bad at getting those because her speed is complete garbage and her magic isn't even that amazing, especially given the fact that, you know, she only has 4 range on rescue. That should be indicative of that fact. But, you know, see, like, if anybody fell into an S category, or like an S trope, you would think it would be Flane, although she doesn't even have that high of growth anyway. She's just bad, generally speaking. Her bases are bad, and her growths seem to be pretty bad. She never becomes this, like, world-breaking force that has this crazy rescue utility, and either way, I mean, like, warp is way better than rescue anyways, so I don't see what the big deal is here. People are like, oh, well, Flame must be good because she has rescue. I think that's ridiculous. But basically, then you have these other 3 units that are going to be footlocked, basically, for pretty much the entire game, and that can get a horse later in the game. But, so in Blue Lion's route, basically, Dedu disappears for several chapters, spoilers, and he doesn't translate into any, like, he's bad at flying and he's bad at riding, and so it's like, it's really annoying to try to get him to do anything on a mount, disregarding the fact completely that he basically misses out on like 10 levels because he's gone for 3 chapters. And, you know, he's never that useful. People are like, oh, he takes, you know, 0 damage from physical units. And it's like, okay, yeah, but the physical units don't tend to be the super threatening units in like later parts of the game. The threatening units tend to be the mages that have Ragnarok and that can do like 40 damage to Dimitri. You know, whenever Dimitri is like generally kicking ass otherwise. Those are the dangerous type units. But, you know, Dedu, he's got like 5 move and takes 0 damage. Oh man. Anyways, I just let it be known, I'm not a huge fan of Dedu. I only used him for most of the first half, so I can't speak entirely on like how good he ends up being in the second half, whatever. But he doesn't seem to me like he would be a particularly great unit, especially given the story circumstances. So Annette. So my problem with Annette is basically she doesn't have a lot of utility in terms of like physic, which a lot of the mages have physics, so that basically, you know, when they're not fighting because they don't have a ton of range to move around, because they're locked to like 4 movement until you get them to Grimory, which is pretty late in the game. It's like, you know, early-ish part of second half of the game. You know, they can't really move all that far unless they have like Thrisis and can shoot something from far away. So you'd hope that they would have physic to be able to like keep up in terms of EXP and to help out your team still. But with Annette, she doesn't even have physic. She has like Restore, oh man, which I guess is like kind of niche, but it's not worth it. And she gets like 18 speed by the end of the game. It's like basically she'll stop leveling speed at some point randomly. Or at least that was my experience. That might be anecdotal. But basically she can't even be this glass cannon type. It's like, it's not even like Lysithea, where she doesn't have a ton of utility until she gets warp. And then essentially she just kills everything otherwise, though. So she's still useful. It's like, and that is not bad at all. She's not good. It's like she wants to be a frontliner so that she can keep up in terms of levels. But if you put her on the front line, she just dies, right? And then with Felix, the problem with Felix is that he falls off actually pretty early on. It's like once you understand how battalions work, you kind of realize that his personal skill kind of sucks because you can easily get some battalions with decent authority rank that give more than 5 strength and give you the option to do gambits, which are really good. But there's that, and then he's not good at lances or horses, and beyond that, you'd have to go out of your way to like not do swords as much to train him in horses and lances, and then also develop the budding talent in reason just to get to Dark Knight or something. Right, so basically, pretty much what ends up happening is you have to go Mortal Savant, and he's like okay as a Mortal Savant. Problem with the Mortal Savant is, yes, it's good that it gives you chip because like a lot of you're not going to be able to one round KO a lot of the late game enemies with Felix, anyways. At least not with the Swordsmaster Felix. So it's good to have him be able to have chip, and like I think he gets physic, but it doesn't heal for much. But basically, it still sucks because he doesn't have Kanto. It's like Thoron doesn't really make up for that much. So it's like he can. He unlocks the ability to kill some armored units that he probably could have killed with the 11 sword anyways by being a Mortal Savant. Otherwise, he's just like, I don't know. I don't think he's that great. He's like not terrible, but again, he's like another one of these footlocked units, right? That is pretty good in early and mid game, although he's falling behind some of these calves, right? But he has nowhere near the same potential as somebody like Cyril, who has a mount and can do like a lot of crazy stuff with a flying mount in the second half of the game. So like that's something you got to consider. But so those are like some units that I would bench for Blue Lions if I played through it against, or at least that I would consider benching, right? And that opens up like what 4 slots. I think something along the lines of 4 slots for recruited units, which, frankly, I mean, I think that pretty clearly opens up a slot for Cyril. Considering, like, you really only your first few recruits that you go out of your way to get are gonna like not be super far behind in terms of skill ranks. That's one of the nice things about Cyril is he comes early enough where he's not like completely gimped by the skill ranks, and the AI decided to train him. Anyways, I guess that's it for the Blue Lions, though. So there's the Golden Deer. Now here, there's really only 2 or 3, I guess, if you include Flame, that I would bench here. I think Marianne's like actually good. I put her here just because I wanted to have the same number. But Marianne is like perfectly fine, and it's nice to have a couple of physic units anyways. So I wouldn't really bench her unless I had like a ton of really good recruits. But Ignatz and Raphael are basically the candidates to bench here. I think is basically Raphael. I think he's bad at riding, but not necessarily bad at flying, and he's good at axes. So I mean, he could be a Wyvern Lord. The problem is that his speed growth is so slow that he's still not going to one round things, and he'll probably still get utterly destroyed by mages. So even if he has Kanto, he's still not all that useful. Ignatz. The thing with Ignatz is he's basically, I mean, I wrote it here, he's basically Felix without a crest. There's not much else to say about it. And he basically is the exact same trope. It's like he could go Mortal Savant path, and he doesn't have the crest, and he doesn't have a Holy Relic that he can use well to have damage, although Felix is arguably worse with that relic. He's nothing special. It's like you can use him for thief utility early game, and train him up a little bit as an adjutant so that you don't completely get killed in Reunion at Dawn or something. But I don't think he's like particularly worth hanging on to because he just doesn't have that much utility late game. There's like plenty of recruits where you can at least replace 2 or 3 units, being Flame, Ignatz, and Raphael. Like in my previous Golden Deer run, basically what I did is I recruited Petra, I recruited Mercedes to have some really good healing utility, and I recruited Cyril, and then I just used those 3, right? And that worked really well. The one thing to note with Golden Deer is that there are like plenty more, since you don't have to focus on recruiting Lysithea, who's also a really good unit. It's easier to get Petra really early, and you can basically you have like a bunch of good flying units to begin with, so you don't have to like round that up out as much. So Cyril does have like a bit more competition in terms of units in Golden Deer, which I find amusing because everybody's like, well, Blue Lions is so easy. Golden Deer actually starts out with a generally much better class comp in terms of like how good some of your units can be, but that's just my opinion, I guess. I don't know. Anyways, so basically, as I've mentioned here, there's like a few units on Blue Lions and Golden Deer that I would pretty much consider just pinching, and that would potentially open up spots for Cyril. There's some other recruitable units that like are somewhat worth it that I'll mention here, and basically you can just decide then, if like Cyril is worth that. I think he's worth a spot, but there is a little bit of competition, and so I'm just trying to be as fair as possible, comparing him to the same people that basically he would be possibly replacing. So, for example, from Black Eagle's house, generally it's smart to recruit Petra. She's probably, like, even recruited, she's probably going to end up being better than Cyril, and it's not super far out of the way to recruit her. Linhardt is nice because he's another good healer and he has warp, so if you want warp instead of fortify from Mercedes, I personally prefer fortify because I usually have Lysithea anyways, but warp is definitely good. But that's basically most of what Linhardt can do. He's not like a great combat unit per se. But anyways, so those are the 2 units for Black Eagles that I would consider on either of these routes. On Golden Deer route, in terms of units you might recruit from Blue Lion's house, I put Mercedes on here mainly because you don't have a really great healer on Golden Deer route to begin with. You have Marianne, who's okay, but Mercedes is like much better because the Fortify really is quite nice. I'm not gonna lie, it's very nice. She translates very well into that dancer slot. She has plenty of charm to win the competition. She has competition with Dorothea in terms of like this slot, and I didn't mention Dorothea, but she's probably worthy of mentioning here. And that both are somewhat decent combat units that are pretty good at healing. The difference here is that Mercedes has Fortify. Unfortunately, like, it's a little more out of the way to recruit her since you need either a B support or investment in bows. The other unit would be Ingrid. She's basically, the reason I didn't compare Cyril to Ingrid is because she's like her own really unique niche. It's kind of interesting. She's basically the only really true Falconite unit, because like the other flyer candidates don't have really good res per se. I mean, I don't know, I guess Flane or somebody like Flane or Annette could maybe fill in that role. It's not something I've looked into too much, but Ingrid does the job really well. She struggles a little bit early game because she doesn't have a ton of strength, but later on it stops mattering because she's basically just gambiting and killing mages anyways, so, and she doesn't have problems killing mages, so it's pretty good. Yeah, and then the units from Golden Deer that I would consider on the Blue Lions route, I would definitely consider Lysithea, mainly because every time you see the Death Knight he just dies. Um, she's not like super hard to recruit. I mean, the faith requirement is a little high because Byleth has a budding talent, so I guess they assume that they should make the requirement a little higher. I think it's like B requirement and C plus with the C support or something. In faith to be able to recruit her, but you can also just use the B support method to get her by like chapter 6 or 7. It's not too bad. She's really good. She gets, I believe, warp at B faith, which is like the earliest that anybody gets warp. So that's really crazy, and her spell list is just utterly ridiculous. I think, granted, I probably gave her like 10 stat boosters from Magic in my last playthrough to like up her by like 10 magic or something like that. But she ended up with like 60-ish magic at level 50, thereabouts. She's really strong. She's decently fast, and you'll notice I also included Lorenz on this list, not because Lorenz is actually good, but because he has Thyrsus. And Thyrsus is like, I'm probably mispronouncing that, but that's really, really good on Lysithea, because basically, take a unit that basically can delete any fast unit in the game that you don't want to deal with on player phase, and then get Dance for it and delete another one, and have a Gambit that does like 90 damage towards the end of the game. So it's something that's completely broken like that. It's just a total delete button, right? And then just give her 2 extra range. That's completely absurd, right? So that's the only reason I would consider going out of your way to try to recruit Lawrence early, is to try to help out Lysithea. But Lawrence himself is just your standard Sylvain, Ferdinand, Lawrence Cav. It's basically the Cav to Dark Knight path, where it's like they have a budding talent in Reason, or are good in Reason, and they'll be pretty good as a Dark Knight, have good chip, but they basically fall off after early game. So I don't think they're they're never really worth going for out of your way to get them. And then Hilda, of course, is a great flyer. She gets access to a hero's relic. She has some problems with missing stuff, and she's not quite as fast as like Petra. But she has a crest, so like she has some options open to her because of that. She's a little harder to recruit, but anyways, she's also a good unit. So basically, I've mentioned 4 units that I would consider choosing between for either of these routes that you could possibly recruit. Really, you only have time to recruit a couple of them, and then you're gonna be benching like 2 or 3 units from your house if you include Flame. The point where basically I just think, I don't think it's like super objectionable to say that Cyril deserves a spot. The only thing that I think really undermines this argument at all is basically that I haven't used Catherine or Shamir. It's very well may be the case that they totally deserve a slot. I just haven't used them. I think Shamir could be decent as a flyer, because she is good at lances already. So it's possible that like she could fill in that niche. Catherine, I would assume, falls off towards the end game. Besides, other people can use Thunderbrand. Most of the appeal with Catherine, from what I can tell, is basically just Thunderbrand. So, but there are options. I'm not saying that it's unobjectionable that Cyril is good. I'm just saying that it's pretty clear that he's not bad, and that everybody is like archetyped him into like this very niche category where he's like either the best thing since sliced bread, or he's completely unusable because he's an est or something. And it's like, that's just totally untrue. Just because, going back to the start here, just because he has aptitude does not mean that he's a pitfall. This guy's actually a pretty good unit. And I have now rambled on for 40 minutes about why you should give this guy a chance. He's crying on the screen. Just at least consider him, okay? He's not super bad. Anyways. Yeah, I'm not gonna... Let's put it this way. I'm not gonna say that this is like gospel or anything. It's like I could very well be wrong in exactly the way that the metagame in this game is going because it's still developing. I just want to point out that nobody else really knows that either, and people that are immediately writing him off or saying that he's like a god, everybody's just gone insane. And it's like it's really weird on this front. I just wanted to comment on this. So, anyways, that's what I have to say about Cyril. Um, and from this, you can also kind of glean my general ideas on the game, which I think is good, and like some grand strategies for units you might want to recruit. So, anyways, I think that's all I wanted to say. So, and end the video here. Bye.